Ever wondered what might have happened to progressive rock if, instead of worshipping the kings of the symphonic circus like Yes or Emerson, Lake and Palmer, we'd given a real shot to the forgotten bastards who cut raw sonic bombs in sweaty basements, spitting in the face of mediocrity with riffs that bleed and melodies that rip you apart? These records, kicked to the curb by labels chasing dollar signs, aren't relics for dusty collectors. They're the pure venom of the era, brutal blends of gritty psychedelia, ancestral folk, and electric fury that could have rewritten rock's history if the suits hadn't taken the easy road. Stick around, because this journey isn't for folks who swallow pre-made playlists. It's for those with the guts to dig in the dirt and unearth treasures still reeking of cigarette smoke and 1970 sweat. We're diving into 5 of them, built on raw confessions from musicians captured by Sounds and Melody Maker before oblivion swallowed them whole. And by the end, you'll want to torch your Spotify and spin vinyls that bite back. Progressive rock didn't start polished, with giant egg covers or keyboards mimicking opera orchestras. It started dirty in 1970, in the guts of an England still reeling from Woodstock's echoes and Vietnam's punches, where bands of hungry kids crammed into makeshift studios to puke out experiments that defied what pop music meant. London was the epicenter, the Marquee Club throbbing with electric blues, Soho pubs overflowing with wild ideas about blending jazz with heavy riffs, and labels like Decca and Polydor signing deals out of desperation, only to ditch what didn't sell instantly. While Pink Floyd dropped Adam Heartmother with Cows and Bells, and Genesis stumbled through Trespass with Twisted Biblical Tales, a handful of outsiders, many fresh from endless jam sessions in Willesden garages or Norfolk villages, cut albums that captured the era's chaos without filters. These guys didn't have big-shot managers or budgets for infinite overdubs. They had rage, filterless cigarettes, and a stubborn belief that rock could be more than 3-minute hits. Quotes from underground mags, like Peter Dunton's Raw Truths to Psychedelic Baby magazine years later, paint a brutal picture. Recording sessions that turned into 18-hour marathons, fights over royalties that never came, and releases drowned by promo for commercial bands. But that rawness is where the greatness lies. Prog, not as show-off nonsense, but as a gut punch, forged in the fire of defiance. These 5 albums, scattered between late 1970 and early 71, are the perfect proof. Ignored back then for not fitting the mold, today they shine like rusty knives that still cut deep. Don't expect grandiose symphonies, expect journeys that drag you to the abyss and toss you back changed, heart racing and mind in tatters. Let's kick off with a sound like a beast waking in a dark basement. It'll All Work Out in Boomland by T2, a record that erupts in August 1970 like hard psych rock swallowed a jazz improv manual and spat it back onto a grease-stained vinyl. Formed by a trio from London's blues underground, playing endless nights at the Marquee alongside relics like pre-Peter Green Fleetwood Mac, T2 was led by drummer and lead vocalist Peter Dunton, with Keith Cross on guitar, a 17-year-old prodigy making his Les Paul weep, and Bernard Jinks on bass, holding the groove like a sailor in a storm, with no fixed organ but cross-handling occasional keyboards for texture. The sessions went down at Morgan Studios in Willesden during the sweltering summer of 1970, in what Dunton later called, in a 2011 Psychedelic Baby magazine interview, a hurricane of endless nights. They'd roll in at midnight and stumble out at dawn, laying down raw takes with no polished overdub garbage. Just the pure noise of souls on fire. Decca, who signed them hoping for the next cream, dropped the album with a psychedelic cover that looked scribbled on a napkin and 0 radio push. Result? Under 3,000 copies sold, while the label bet big on Deep Purple. But listen to In Circles, the 8.5-minute opener. A distorted guitar riff that crosshammers like he's exorcising demons. Over a drum pulse Dunton pounds with primal fury, with keyboard textures evoking early Black Sabbath's weight, mixed with Traffic's fluidity. It's not just noise, it's living dynamics. The main theme spins in hypnotic loops, shifting from bluesy jams to ethereal lulls where Jinx's bass lines slither like underground roots. Dunton sang with a rasp like a post-shift factory worker's lament, lyrics about urban alienation hitting like 1970s prophecies, and Cross answered with solos that aren't about showing off but pure need. He admitted most were improvised on the spot, driven by gut, no sheet music or breathers. Moved to No More White Horses, a near 6-minute piece starting with a fragile acoustic groove, like Donovan falling into a hallucinogenic pit, then exploding into an electric climax where Cross's overdriven Gibson weaves with vocal harmonies that foreshadow 90s stoner rock. Side B holds JLT, a 12-minute odyssey that's the album's heart. It opens with a funky riff Jinx anchors with surgical precision, Dunton tossing in Ginger Baker-esque drum breaks from his Air Force days, and Cross adding keyboard swells that carve sonic chasms, all crashing into a jam that dissolves in feedback like a bad dream waking. Why's this great, even if most prog fans skip it? It drags the genre back to its visceral roots, not a tower of ivory virtuosity, but an emotional beatdown reflecting the post-revolution British youth's rage, capturing heavy psych's DNA before it turned cliché. Influences abound. Sabbath's heft, Colosseum's improv, Pentangle's folk touches from Cross and Dunton's street jams. The impact? Bands like Cayuse and Monster Magnet name T2 as an underground beacon, rediscovered via 90s bootlegs. Oblivion hit fast. A disastrous Scandinavian tour with stolen gear and drunk audiences killed the band, leaving Dunton to solo projects and Cross to anonymous session work. Today, original Decca vinyls fetch a fortune at record fairs, not for hype but because the album rewards repeat spins. Each play uncovers new layers, like Jinx's subtle bass echo in Morning, a closing ballad that builds from acoustic whispers to a Cross solo that leaves your chest burning, blending melancholy with a quiet rage screaming, "Life's a jam that doesn't end." It's prog that makes you ditch the remote and grab an instrument, proving genius doesn't need spotlights to blaze. Jump to the next year, with roots deep in 70s chaos, and find this is when Gracious. The second and final gasp from Gracious, a sonic maze dropped in May 1971 that grabs symphonic prog by the throat and throws it into a cage match with hard rock and fleeting jazz, emerging with glorious scars. This quintet of London underground veterans, Paul Sandy Davis on lead vocals, 12-string guitar, and percussion, a charismatic frontman singing like a possessed preacher, Alan Cowderoy on razor-sharp guitar, Tim Wheatley on groovy bass, Robert Lipson on relentless drums, and Martin Kitcat on keyboards, mellotron, electric piano, and organ, had already released the 1970 Gracious debut on Vertigo, a swirl gatefold capturing choral harmonies and ethereal mellotron. But in 71, after internal fights and a chaotic reshuffle, they cut this at Trident Studios, the same den where Bowie was brewing his glam demons. Davis, in a 1975 Record Mirror chat, called the sessions a crazed delirium of everything mixed. They'd walk in with vague sketches and walk out with half-hour suites ignoring Philip's demands, Vertigo's bankrupt successor, for radio-friendly tracks. The album opens with Supernova, a 21-minute epic split in 2 acts. A rival of The Traveler starts with floating mellotron evoking King Crimson's In the Court Ghosts, but Cowderoy injects Stratocaster riffs with wah-wah that slice like blades, while Kitcat dances on electric piano over Lipson's Pulse, swinging between jazz grooves and heavy thuds. It's pure non-linear structure. Themes reappear mutated, like in Blood Red Sun, where Davis and Cowderoy's harmonized vocals sound like a choir of fallen angels. Lyrics about personal apocalypses echoing post-hippie disillusionment, with Wheatley anchoring it with bass lines slithering like pulsing veins. Move to Fugue in D minor, a warped Bach homage where Kitcat's organ weaves with Cowderoy's solos in patterns blending Baroque with Vanilla Fudge's weight, building tension that explodes in Lipson's drum breaks, pounded with last-round fury. What elevates this over the 70 debut is raw maturity, no longer innocent sketches, but a cohesive redemption in chaos narrative, with influences from Procol Harum's harmonies to Soft Machine's jazzy drift. Kitcat used a beat-up mellotron borrowed from Trident's neighboring sessions. Its textures in The Dream, a 10-minute piece shifting from orchestrated calms to overdriven guitar blasts, sucking you into a vortex like the album's a sonic black hole. Why is it great despite the obscurity? It captures prog at its deliciously ambiguous peak, symphonic without pomposity, heavy without caricature, and quotes like Cowderoy's 1972 Sounds rant reveal the frustration. Phillips saw us as a risk, wanting another Sabbath, but we delivered a Frankenstein they couldn't sell. Result: a May '71 release with a tacky cover and zero promo, a measly 2,000 copies sold, and the band crumbling after a rain-soaked, fight-fueled Glastonbury flop. The legacy? Muse and Porcupine Tree cite the harmonies as inspiration, and 90s BGO reissues reignited the flame. Listen to CBS, a side B instrumental building with organ swells and riffs that fade out in eternal suspense. It leaves you breathless, wondering why playlist dominating prog feels so tame. These guys didn't copy, they reinvented, and the album still echoes like a muffled scream begging for max volume. Drop down to England's south, to Norfolk's marshes where folk wasn't hippie posturing but blood in the veins, and stumble on Culpeper's Orchard's self-titled debut, dropped in March 1971 by Polydor as a rural gut punch to urban prog, blending pagan flutes with electric riffs howling like autumn winds. This quartet, Cy Nicklin on guitar and raspy vocals, an English expat in Denmark singing like he's summoning Celtic spirits, Niels Henriksen on bass and occasional keyboards, Roger Barker on drums pounding like thunder in grim fairy tales, and Tom McEwen on secondary guitar and keyboards, came from tiny villages playing pubs for drunk farmers, until signing with Polydor in a mad bid for accessible hits. Sessions happened in fall 1970 at Polydor's Copenhagen studios to dodge UK budget cuts. But the release came in '71, with Nicklin describing them to Folk Rock magazine in the '80s as a dirty rebellion against tame folk. They arrived with hysterical violins and banshee-wailing flutes, ignoring producers pushing for Fairport Convention Light. The album opens with Banjocle, a 48-second banjo interlude evoking medieval bonfires. But Mountain Music Part 1 explodes with an acoustic riff Nicklin electrifies, a guest flute weaving over Barker's breaks that pivot from pastoral to furious, like Jethro Tull crashing into Captain Beefheart on a foggy road. The full Mountain Music suite, 15 minutes across 2 parts, is the killer. Abrupt shifts from fiddle and acoustic calms, Henriksen plucking lines that smell of damp earth, to overdriven SG blasts where Nicklin injects heavy blues, lyrics on local myths and resistance delivered with an English drawl that sticks to your soul. Hey You People follows as a 90-second folk lament, but Watch the Man, nearly 7 minutes, turns circus. Medieval fiddle laced with bluesy riffs dragging you to a pagan dance. Barker's tribal percussion pulsing like a racing heart. Its brilliance lies in authentic hybridity. Prog embracing rural roots without fake romanticism, influencing Comus psych folk and Horslip's heavy folk rock, with unstructured arrangements rewarding repeat spins. Hear Henriksen's bass in Ode to Resistance build subtle tension to a fluted climax that gives chills. Nicklin spat at Polydor for wanting them cute, and the label retaliated with half-assed folk promo, burying the release when it didn't hit Danish radios. A chaotic European tour followed, with broken vans and confused crowds, leading to a 1972 breakup. Sales? Pitiful. But 2000's esoteric reissues turned it into a vinyl hunter's grail. It's music that lives, inviting you to a bonfire where prog isn't elitist, but primal instinct. Raw, flawed, irresistible. Keep the pulse subtle but sharp as a hidden blade, and hit King Progress by Jackson Heights, an October 1970 debut where Lee Jackson, the nice bassist, Keith Emerson's partner in Fire and Brimstone days, forged an antidote to bombast, turning prog into chamber folk with jazz claws that cut the heart quietly. Post-Nice Split, Jackson built this with Charlie Harcourt on guitar and keyboards, Brian Chatton on main keyboards, a wizard painting subtle textures, John McBurney on acoustic guitar, mellotron and backing vocals, and no fixed drummer, with Tommy Sloan guesting on drums for Swing and Fury. Cut at IBC and at Vision Studios with Damon Lyon Shaw and Eddie Offord in London's rainy winter of 1970, it grew from Jackson's solo demos, expanded in intimate sessions. In a 1970 New Musical Express piece, Jackson was raw. The nice was explosive chaos, but I needed something that hurt quietly, folk with jazz-touching urban loneliness. Doubting Thomas opens with 12-string guitar evoking a dark Donovan, but Chatton weaves electric piano in circular patterns hinting at Van der Graaf generator, while Sloan holds a minimalist pulse that lets it breathe. Nice reworks like Insomnia gain McBurney's harmonized vocal layers, making them more human, vulnerable. Lyrics on doubt and loss Jackson delivers with a trembling voice. Mr. Screw follows as a 4-minute folk ballad, Harcourt's Spanish guitar dancing over acoustic bass, but Chatton's modal keyboard twists add prog depth without excess. The climax hits with Sunshine Freak, nearly 6 minutes building from whispers to a guest string swell, Sloan's breaks echoing Nice's swing but with chamber restraint. Its greatness is in subtlety. In an era of excess, Jackson proves prog can be confessional, melodies sticking like gum while lyrics slash at isolation. Influences from Bert Jansch's folk and Miles Davis's whispered jazz. Chatton used a beat-up Fender Rhodes, crafting misty pads, and Martin Birch's mix, later of Deep Purple fame, captures intimacy without coldness. Obscure because charisma, obsessed with Genesis and Van der Graaf gave it a tacky cover and no tour. Jackson played as a drumless trio to save cash, with a measly 4,000 sales. But listen to How Can We Go On? A progression climbing slowly, Jackson's vocals tearing your chest, leaving an ache that lingers days. It's distilled prog, for souls tired of spectacle and craving truth that wounds. To cap this unstable flight, Soar with Fly on Strange Wings by Jade, a June 1970 DJM Records album redefining folk prog as winged and treacherous, led by Marion Siegel's crystalline voice, a rare woman steering the era's macho chaos. With John Field on percussion and congas, bringing exotic touches, Dave Waite on bass and vocals, and Rod Edwards on keyboards and arrangements, painting landscapes with piano and mellotron, the quartet cut it at Trident Studios in March 1970 on a shoestring budget, produced by John Miller, with Glyn Johns engineering. Sigil, in a 1972 sounds piece, didn't mince words. DJM Suits laughed at a woman leading Wanting Tame Folk, but we gave melodies that fly free, with jazz and harmonies that defy. Amongst Anemones opens with Edwards' floating piano, Sigil singing like a drowned siren, but Waite's grooves blend Nick Drake with Soft Machine for ethereal hybridity. Raven follows as a 3-minute gem, modal progression rising like a broken wing, Siegel's vocals raw with loss. The title track, Fly on Strange Wings, is 4 minutes of folk jazz with Field's exotic percussion like a bizarre jam, Edwards' Honer adding watery textures. Mayfly floats with CSN-style harmonies, but modal keyboard twists lift it to subtle prog. Its essence is addictive melody, hooks that grab first listen, revealing layers in loops, influencing experimental Joan Baez and Pentangle. DJM botched promotion, chasing glam, and creative fights dissolve the band. But here what have you got to lose? Chords embracing instability, Siegel whispering broken promises. It's prog that lifts you to the sky and drops you, emotionally devastating. These 5, T2's Primal Fury, Gracious, Chaotic Symph, Culpepper's Pagan Electricity, Jackson Heights Chamber Cuts, Jade's Folk Flight are 1970 to 71's bloody subtext, great for rawness the system buried. Unearth them, feel the pulse reborn, and let rock consume you again.